Welcome everyone. In this video, we're going to discuss how we can bring in external libraries into Google Earth. Oftentimes, government agencies, organizations, and even individuals will prepare their own Google Earth databases, and sometimes they're going to make those freely available online. So if you want to, you can download them and you can import them into your application. I've already covered in depth how you can create your own databases in Google Earth under the using Google Earth as a database session. So if you're interested, please make sure to check that video out. In this video, instead, we're going to talk about how we can look for those kinds of libraries that other people have prepared and how we can bring them into Google Earth. Just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, I've already prepared a bunch of example libraries and I've placed links to those under the description of this video. So I'm just going to select one of them and I'm going to import it into Google Earth. For example, I may want to look at the USGS topographic maps. So I'm going to click on this link. This is going to bring me to this earthpoint.us website where there is a link to the database as a KML file. So if you click on this view on Google Earth, the KML file is going to be downloaded to your hard drive. In this case, it was placed on my desktop, so we can see it here. All I have to do is to simply double click on it or drag and drop it in the Google Earth viewport. And now we can see the database was imported and it's overlaid on top of the Google Earth globe. Now in our list of places, we can see the database being loaded and there is nothing really in this folder. It's simply a live connection to that database. So we don't have access to the raw data that is contained in the database, but we can still display it inside of Google Earth. Now, this being a live connection, if I want to get more detail to be displayed, I'll have to zoom into an area and the database is going to automatically refresh to load more information about that particular area. This database in particular covers just the US. So if I want to get more detail, I'll have to zoom into that region. So I'm going to zoom into an area here and we can see the tiles are being loaded as I zoom in. And the more I zoom in, the more detail is going to be loaded until the point that we reach the maximum detail that the database has to offer. As I pan around the screen, the tiles that cover that section of the map are going to be automatically loaded. Like I already mentioned, we don't have access to the raw data that makes up this database, but we can control how it is being displayed or rather loaded inside of Google Earth. To do that, we have to access the properties. So I'm going to right click on the network link under places and I'm going to choose properties. Under the refresh tab is where we can access those settings. We have two sections here, a time-based refresh and a view-based refresh. A time-based refresh will simply refresh the database or the tiles based on time. So at the moment, this is set to just one refresh, but if we want to, we can, for example, set it to refresh periodically. So if I set periodically under when, we can add the time interval that we want the data to refresh to. Normally, I'm always going to keep this at once because a periodic refresh may put stress on the application. We can also adjust the view-based refresh. This is in fact what was happening when I was panning the viewport. So every time I pan the viewport and the camera stops, 2 seconds afterwards, the tiles are going to be refreshed. We can adjust the time that it takes for the tiles to refresh after the camera stops, for example. Maybe we want this to be 0 seconds, so we get instant refresh. Or we could also change this from after camera stops to on request or never. So if we don't want the database to refresh when we are panning the viewport, then you can set this to never. And now if I pan around, then the tiles are not going to be refreshed. This could be very useful if you want to just isolate a certain area. So let's say that I have zoomed into this area and I'm happy with the data that has been loaded. I don't want it to refresh anymore or to load more data. Then I'm just going to keep this at never. And this is going to isolate just the area that I zoomed into. Alternatively, we can set this to on request. So now if I zoom into a new area that I want to load data for, all I have to do is to refresh the database. So this is what the on request means. It basically means whenever you refresh the database, we're going to load the data. To do a refresh, all you have to do is to right click on the database under places and then click on refresh. There is also a shortcut to the refresh command, which is Control or Command R on the keyboard. So if I zoom into a new area now, I can just press Ctrl and R on my keyboard, and it's going to refresh the data for that area. So I don't have to right click every time. Now, like I mentioned, there are many databases online that you can access. Now, like I already mentioned, there may be many databases that have already been prepared and are available online. Under the description of this video, I've only included a small sample. So now I wanted to spend some time to show you how I would go about looking for those databases very simply. So far as I know, there is no centralized location for those kinds of databases, so you have to look for them one by one. Once you get an idea of what you're looking for, you can go into Google. Then in the bottom right corner, you could go under Settings and then under Advanced Search. You can limit your search just to a certain file type. From the drop-down menu here under any format, you can set this to either Google Earth KML or Google Earth KMZ. I'm going to limit my search just to KML, and then under the search field, I can, for example, type US topo, and then all of the search results that I get are going to be only of KML files. I could, for example, download the USGS topographic maps of Maine, so just by clicking on this link. Then I'm going to go under my desktop and double click on the file to load it. And now I just have to zoom into an area so that the detail is going to be loaded up. You may have to wait a little bit for the data to load. And now we can see the contours appearing for the area that I'm zoomed into. So this just about covers the process that I use to look for these kinds of databases. Now, like I said, there is no centralized location for them, so it is a little bit time consuming to look for them. But over time, you could build your own database, or we could build one together in the workplace community. So if you do find something, then feel free to share it with everyone. Now, before we leave it off with this video, just one quick tip on using databases. They don't take almost any space simply because the data is being stored on a server somewhere, and all that Google Earth is doing is it's linking to it using the network links. However, they do take processing power from your machine when they're being loaded. So you could keep them in your list of places inside of Google Earth. They're not going to take any space pretty much, and they're not going to make Google Earth load slower. But it is a good idea to uncheck their visibility so that you don't accidentally trigger them every time you launch the application, because this may slow Google Earth down upon loading. So just if you keep them unchecked, then you could stack hundreds of them potentially, and they're not going to impact your performance. And whenever you need to load any database up, then in those cases, you can just check the visibility for that particular database. This is also a general tip whenever you're storing any kind of data inside of Google Earth, whether it's a network link or raw data. If you don't need it, then it is a good idea to just uncheck its visibility so that Google Earth is not drawing on processing power to keep it displayed. And with that said, this wraps it up for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope the information was useful, and see you in the next session.